When we mention the need to raise taxes, a natural question is, why don't we tap more on our reserves instead? Indeed, we have been doing so over the last decade. I mentioned earlier that we introduced the NIRC framework in 2008. This started out with the reserves managed by the GIC and Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS. Temasek was then included in a framework in 2015. Through this framework, we now spend on the basis of total returns on our reserves, including both realized and unrealized capital gains. Over the last 10 years since the implementation of the NIRC framework, the NIRC contribution, or NIRC, has more than doubled from $7 billion in FY 2009 to an estimated $15.9 billion in FY 2018. The NIRC is now the largest contributor to our revenues, larger than any single tax, including GST and corporate and personal income taxes. We are able to supplement our revenues with NIRC today because our predecessors judiciously set aside the savings from a strong growth during Singapore's earlier stage of economic development. Now that our economy is maturing and our population is aging, we must husband this resource carefully, prudently, and responsibly. Currently, we spend up to 50% of expected net investment returns and keep the remainder in our reserves. This allows our reserves to grow with our economy. If instead we use 100% of the returns, the principal sum of the reserves will stagnate over time, and the NIRC as a share of GDP will consequently fall as our economy grows. The impact of this will not be trivial, given that our budget now relies on the NIRC as the largest source of revenue. In a more extreme scenario, if we spend more than our investment returns, we'll eat into our nest egg. Doing so would mean that our reserves will shrink over time, generating a progressively smaller stream of income in the years that follow, till eventually our reserves are exhausted. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not the Singapore way. We must also never forget that as an island nation with no hinterland and no natural resources, our reserves lend long-term stability to our economy and afford us the means to weather crisis. During the 1997 Asian financial crisis, our reserves and strong economic fundamentals kept the Singapore dollar stable, even as currency speculators were attacking other regional currencies. During the 2008 global financial crisis, our reserves anchored our economy against the storm by backing a $150 billion guarantee for all bank deposits in Singapore. And during the recession in 2009, our reserves funded a total of $4 billion for the Jobs Credit Scheme and Special Risk Sharing Initiative to help employers and employees tide over the difficult period. As a small and open economy, we will always be vulnerable to fluctuations in the global economy and financial markets. We can never predict where or when the next crisis will come. But we know when the next crisis hits, we will be able to weather the storm because we have our reserves.